Hello, good morning.
Hey, everybody.
You having a good day?
So far, so good.
Yeah? If you were answering that poll, what would it have been? What's
Well,
your forecast today?
the weather yesterday was actually about 75
I know.
degrees. Wasn't that great? In
It
December,
was.
can you believe that?
It
But
was.
today, for me, internally, my mood is just about the same, although I like it just a bit warmer. So maybe about 85
Okay.
and sunny. It's for me.
Sunny and
How
85.
about you?
Mine's a little bit partly cloudy, only because it's been a very long morning. Sick kiddo at home.
That's
So
what happens when you have kids.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. I'm learning, but I'm interested from you all. If you didn't get a chance to participate in the poll, let us know if your internal mood today were the forecast. What would the forecast be? So you can use emojis or just comment. Let us know.
Yep.
I think it's interesting, this particular question, because it's kind of leads us into our topic today.
It really does. You know, we're coming to the end of the year, right?
Oh my gosh, we are.
And we're about to start a brand new one. So if you're kind of like me, I'm thinking about, all the things that I want to do, or some goals that I have for 2022. But before I really get there, I think I want to make sure that I kind of look backward a little bit, do a little bit of reflection about how my past year went.
Sure.
And, my own knowledge, my own skills and things like that, because that might change then what my goals might be for 2022.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that all requires this art of self-awareness.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it is crazy. I mean, let's just pause for a second and realize like the year is gonna be over very soon. Happy holidays. Wait, where's that? There it is.
Yeah.
Happy holidays, everyone. But yeah, that's only now less than or a little over a week away.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Wow. So as we talk about this art of self-awareness, when we think about how important it is to us as we move into that new year, let's just kind of define what self-awareness is for our audience.
Yeah, and to me, I'll start by saying that I think that this is a skill that is probably one of the most difficult skills to master, especially in a leadership role.
Yeah.
And it all kind of boils down to me, the way I I like to think about it is the way we see ourselves is oftentimes a lot different than the way that other people see us.
Oh, yeah.
And so really kind of, understanding what your current state is, kind of understanding what my strengths, what my weaknesses may be,
right.
Understanding how my moods and my emotions sometimes will affect my decision making or how I interact with other people. As human beings, we develop a lot of habits throughout our lifetime. And sometimes we're just not so aware, there's that word awareness, about ourselves, our decisions, our actions, our behavior, and the impact that has, especially as a leader, on those that follow us.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's, part of it when we consider it, and I bet we were all probably in this boat at some point or another, it's uncomfortable. Like to realize and think, maybe I got some stuff I gotta work on.
Well, me? You mean I got some stuff I gotta work on? Yeah. That's what makes it so difficult sometimes. And again, I think that if you think about leaders that you have really admired in the past, I bet you anything, they're probably leaders who practice this art of self-awareness over and over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
Because we can't make corrections. We can't get better without knowing first and foremost, what kind of effect I might be having on my followers.
Right.
And so I think it's really an important skill. And again, I think it's the one that we probably don't engage in enough.
Right.
Probably.
Right. And I think that it is interesting. We might have seen in the poll, if you watched our video before, there have been studies on this idea of self-awareness. And what the surveys have shown is that 95% of people actually believe they're self-aware, but only about 10 to 15% of people actually are. So this isn't a skill that everybody has.
No, it really isn't. And let me ask you this: have there been moments in your life, in looking back, where you're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, or thought that, or made that decision because I thought it was the right kind of course, but looking back, you're just like, oh, what a stupid mistake I made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think when you mentioned earlier this idea that good leaders are self-aware, I had a good leader who helped me become more self-aware. So
Right.
that was one of the experiences, probably that very poignant moment in my life that I was like, oh man, I got to do some work here. But I am emotional, which is no surprise to you or maybe some of our audience viewers there. And
I am too.
I know.
Yeah, I am too.
And so I used to work at the police department, and one of my mentors, great leader, was my sergeant there as well, and he was the first one that really brought it to my attention and how my emotional expression was really affecting the people that were around me. And it was hard to take at first, but then as I really started processing some of the information he was saying to me, and I started thinking back through my careers and recognizing, oh yeah, that probably does make a little bit more sense now as to why there seemed to be conflict in these particular areas with these colleagues and so on. So it was a very pivotal moment in my career, and the fact that he brought that to my attention, and that really began my journey of self-awareness.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we all have our own perception of the world, right? The lens that we view ourselves through, as well as maybe other people. But we need to sometimes check that lens, don't we? Is the lens distorting the truth? Is it distorting the facts out there, or you're just believing what you want to believe, perhaps, rather than believing what's really going on? So it's important to kind of take that step back a little bit and do that self-examination, that reflection.
It absolutely is. And I think that one of the, as we mentioned, it's hard, because it's an uncomfortable space. But part of that is truly because we get kind of these feel good reactions when we think we're good. You know what I mean? Like there's kind of this mental, like we play with our own minds when it comes to this, where it's like, oh, I'm a good person. I did X, Y, and Z. Well, that makes me happy. And so I want to keep feeling that happiness. So I'm going to keep thinking that I'm doing good, where maybe the perception of someone else around me is
completely different.
Yeah.
It could be something completely different. This is a skill that requires, I think, a lot of things, if you will.
Absolutely.
First, it is about that idea of reflection. It's going to be hard to become more self-aware as a leader without taking the time to really sit and think about it. And I don't know about you, but when I kind of engage in this, a lot of times it's at the coffee shop on Sunday mornings by myself. I sometimes take a journal with me. I take a notebook with me and a pen, and I'll get up and I'll be one of the first people there at the coffee shop in the morning.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, exactly. But I like to sit and I like to think about, what's happened in the last week, what's happened in the last month, and take that time to kind of pick apart what's happened and become more self-aware about my role or my decisions or my interactions with other people. Yeah. So I think it takes that moment of reflection, I think is going to be an important thing. And reflection without honesty is probably not going to serve you well, right? So like you talked about, it's that feel-good moment. So we got to be honest with ourselves, right? We have to kind of put it out there and recognize that, very rarely is it one person, fault or something else, but what's my role in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we can control, right? And I think I am grateful because we've talked a lot about that in training. I think you and Ray have done a great job modeling that approach. And I think that for me, it almost was a relief to recognize, like, I do have the power to change things that I want to change about me. I don't have to rely on other people changing. And so that does require that self-awareness.
You don't have control over other people changing, right? You can guide, you can maybe influence, but the decision to change is really about yourself. It's not about, that's why I think leaders, they think of themselves when they get into a leadership position, oh, things are going to change around here now that I'm the leader. It's just like, well, I hate to tell you, you really don't have a lot of power over whether or not people make and how people make decisions. So, but you do have control of yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's where to start. Start from within.
I want to pause for a second. We have a lot more great content here, but I want to just reach out to you guys because we're talking about some strategies. I love yours, Dewey, as far as journaling. But I'd like to ask our audience, what are some strategies maybe you use that you pause and you reflect? How do you practice your self-awareness? Where does it start for you? And so we're curious. I think we we like to give tips, but we also learn from you all.
Absolutely.
So share with us in the comment section. What are some ways that you have started kind of this reflection process?
Right.
And I'll tell you, I know when I'm too busy, like when I haven't had the time to do that, because it's a frantic mindset. And right now with a 1-year-old, that's a pretty common thing. But when I get those moments, and I actually took this one lunch break, I decided, I was like, I just need to get out of the office. I need to go away. And I sat out in a park in my truck, but at the park, just taking some time to think about everything that had even gone on that week. And so I know for some people out there, if you're in the same position maybe as me, where you got little ones you're taking care of and time is difficult to find, just start small and start somewhere with your reflection practices. I used to also do it before I went to bed at night, because I'd have about 10 or 15 minutes before I was just really tired and had to hit the sack. But I think that just taking some time and recognizing when you haven't given that time to it. And I think it's pretty easy to tell, at least it is for me.
Yeah. And some other things that I think are important to be able to do this, to be able to become maybe a little bit more self-aware, is you've got to remain open. You've got to remain vulnerable to other people.
Absolutely.
You've got to kind of build that trust and build that relationship, because, when I'm thinking about, I can only see a situation from my own perspective, right? So one of the other skills I think is really necessary is to ask for feedback from others. And if you haven't done the job of developing that great relationship with other people, then they probably won't tell you what you really need to hear.
Right.
They might tell you what they think you want to hear,
right.
As opposed to what you really need to hear. So, when you have a trusting relationship built with somebody, then it's a lot easier to take that in, isn't it? Because I always look at feedback as a gift that somebody is giving me, regardless of whether it is true or not, regardless of whether I think it's true or not. It is that person's perception that they are giving to you. And to me, that's a precious gift. Yeah.
It really is. And I think I've learned that a lot from you, because I didn't do so well with this at first. And that's something, we're not taught that in school, and it is something that's kind of trial by error. And so I was grateful, and I do see that now. And I've actually opened myself up and gone to even people who maybe I wouldn't have gone to before, but just to get all of those different perspectives. You and Ray know me very well. My husband knows me very well, but maybe I have another person I sit on a board with, who doesn't know me as well, but I want to get their perception of me in that environment. Because what ends up happening is, if we're not very clear and we're not consistent on displaying like who we are, we kind of start role playing, meaning like you're a different person in different places.
And with different people.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of scary.
You never know what you're going to get then, right? That can really affect, especially from a leadership perspective, that can really affect your followers' trust, right?
Absolutely.
Because they never know, you're not consistent with who you are,
right?
And what your values are, what your beliefs are, and so one day it's this way, another day it's a different, kind of a different way, and so as a follower, then I'm left like, my head's spinning. I don't know what to really expect today.
Oh yeah. I had a supervisor that I remember was very much like that, and you kind of tiptoed in because you weren't quite sure, like, how's she gonna be today? Is it good to like go in and say hi, or like? And
did you and the rest of the staff have your little hand signals, like
we did
when somebody had when somebody recognized that she was in a bad mood?
Oh no, then it was. But it was and it's. That makes for a tough environment.
It does.
Life and work can be difficult at times on their own. We don't need to add to it.
Right,
so
right.
I want to pause. It looks like we're getting some comments in. So Melanie is saying that self-reflection often occurs when she's struggling to find a solution to a problem, having trouble connecting with someone else. More of an organic process. Great. For myself, not necessarily intentional. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. We do encounter things in life that we're not quite sure about. I think that brings a little bit more intention then to set and to think about of those things, the things that we struggle with. So it
Mm-hmm.
causes us maybe to be a little bit more intentional. I guess what I'm going to suggest to you is try to get into a habit of self-awareness. So, like for me, it's like going to the coffee shop, or maybe on a more regular basis. And what I'm trying to do is to develop that habit of self-awareness moving forward.
The how am I doing conversations. I think that's, I go into Ray's office frequently. We're every other week or every week sometimes. Hey, how am I doing? Am I, up, not just on my production level, like what I'm doing here, but like, how am I doing being your colleague? Right. I do this with my husband. Like,
great idea.
How am I doing being your wife?
I think that's a great idea.
I remember the first time I asked that Dewey, he was like,
kind of caught him off guard a little
bit.
Right.
But now it's common. It's a common language in our household. So he asked me, and I ask him almost on a weekly basis. Yeah. So,
and especially when you think about it with those work relationships and things like that, there are some great questions I think you can ask people in those moments. One that I really love is, what do you want to see me start doing differently? What is it that you want to see me continue to do? Or is there anything that you want to see me stop doing? Now, again, this is somebody's feedback that they're giving to you, and you get to be the final judge of that feedback about yourself. Yeah. So I'm not saying that you have to, always take that other person's, well, you should do this, and then you go down. Right. That's not what we're talking about here. But what we are talking about is that person has a perception. And so especially if you're the leader, what are you going to do about that perception?
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's good to always kind of gain that in all the hats that you wear. Yeah. All the hats that you wear. So I want to thank you, Sarah. I appreciate your comment. Information's so great. Thank you. I will say, one of the things I learned, I'm going to pause quickly from our content, is if you are the type that prefers to not respond where everyone sees you, if you see that code, it's right there. You can actually scan that, and it will take you to an anonymous place where you can comment or ask questions. I want to honor our introverts, maybe, that we have on today's webinar. So please go ahead and send those in that way if you prefer.
But we really do like to have you know who's asking questions if you don't mind. Yeah. If you don't mind. Yeah. We're just trying to hit it for everybody.
That's right. We take care of everyone here at MTI. So doing some other things, right? What are some other things required to be more self-aware? We've talked about that reflection time, really being honest, being genuine, like being willing to say, all right, maybe I'm not seeing this exactly the right way. Yeah. But I also think that this requires a little bit of vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to remain open, and you have to remain vulnerable. I mean, to me, that's the definition of trust.
Absolutely.
Is to remain open and remain vulnerable to other people. Again, you get to be the judge of the feedback that other people give to you, but it is a precious gift. They're giving you their perspective of who you are. So it is important to listen. It is important to recognize. Listening, I think, is another one. Another really important skill with the idea of self-awareness, especially when you're seeking feedback from other people. So are you listening to agree or to disagree with what this person says? Because sometimes these conversations can be tough. Sure. You find yourself in a defensive posture based on what somebody is saying about you. Or are you going to remain open, and you're going to really consider, again, not to say that you have to agree with everything that you're hearing, but to listen to understand. Yeah. Listen to understand. Yeah.
And that's incredibly important. And we've talked about that on some of our other Facebook Lives too. And there's actually a Chinese symbol. It's called Ting. And it's actually the symbol for listening. And the symbol includes all the elements, not just your ears. It's your eyes. It's your heart. It's your mind, because when you're listening authentically to somebody else, it doesn't just require your ears. Right. Minding that mental chatter, making sure you're in a place, when we talk about the heart, to genuinely want to receive that information, not just sitting there in your head, going, can't believe they're telling me this, so there's lots of different elements to that.
Right.
But,
and then, as we think about, what this is really required to become more self-aware, I think it's also important to kind of maybe take a look at yourself through many different lenses. Absolutely. Right? So I'm going to put these glasses down. I'm going to put another pair on and maybe look at something a little bit different. So one of the first things that I like to think about, and again, these are things that I'm looking at in my journal, is who do I think I am? Right? I try to answer the question, who am I? and kind of the person I think I am. Those things could be different, right? You may see me one way, but the way that I think I see myself could be something completely different.
Right.
So, getting into your head a little bit then, and then to understand, how others may view me, okay, or understand me, or think who I am.
Right.
Okay. And then another question I think is important, and you can take these one by one, is take a look at it from your family perspective, because we all have families. And so, so who does my family think I am?
Right.
Can't tell you how many times I've had some interesting conversations with my 22-year-old daughter.
I can
about
only
this.
imagine.
I think of myself as a dad in one way.
Sure.
She probably thinks of me in a completely different way sometimes as well. Although she did get her booster shot 2 days ago, and she really kind of got a little, had some reactions to it. So I made her a little bed on the couch last night, and so she did say, this morning she woke up, she said, I do feel better because I had a daddy who takes care of me.
Oh,
yeah, okay. So that's one of those moments where, my perception and her perception,
they're lining up. Yeah.
that moment. But it doesn't happen too often.
Sure.
Doesn't happen too often. So who does my family think that I am? Who are my, and then, expand your circle, right? Because it's not just family, but I also have friends. So, and again, taking some time to contemplate your relationships is so critical, I think, in this, because, when things get really tough, it's those people that we count on, right, to help us get through it.
Absolutely.
And if you're not necessarily taking care of those relationships, then those folks won't be around when you kind of need them. And so beyond just my family, I want to think about who are my friends and how do they perceive me? Who do they think I am? And then you might also want to think about, your work family, and how does those folks, how do they view me? What's their perception of me? So you just kind of start within your little circle, and you kind of work your way out.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's what I say, think about every hat that you wear, and have you taken the time to really solicit some of that good feedback about how you're doing in all of those roles? And it can seem overwhelming at first, but it really is good perspective to have. And you do get the opportunity. That's the cool part about this whole self-awareness journey. You get to kind of pick and choose what you're going, if you're going to take some of that and how you're going to use it, or if you're not. But it's good to have it. Yeah. That's what self-awareness is.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find ourselves as we grow and as you develop, that we look at different things at different points of our lives. The way that I looked at my life when I was in my 20s, or even my 30s, or even my 40s, versus how I look at my life today.
Not a day over 30, do
that's awfully nice of you to say, but we all know that's not true. I mean, let's be self-aware here, shall we? But things in my life take on different importance, different meanings, different priorities. And so, as we grow, as we develop, maybe the things that we look at, that we reflect on, in our self-awareness will probably change as well. Yeah.
And we don't know what we don't know. When you think about that a little bit, I have another example I can share, but I had this pop up on my Facebook feed the other day, and it was this comment I had made pre-baby, well before I'd had my son. But I was kind of being cynical and sarcastic a little bit, because I'd seen all my friends who had already had children were talking about their, 15-month-old, their 18-month-old, their 20-month-old. And I'm like, what the heck? When did we start talking about, instead of 1 year, 2 year? And I had no idea, right? I wasn't a parent.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a parent, I look back, and I was cynical in the sense that I made myself a 512-month-old at that time. But I look back and I realized, that was kind of a crummy thing to do. My friends probably had a certain perspective about that particular post, or the effect it would have had on them and our relationship. They didn't say anything to me, which thank you to my friends. But it really, now that I know as a parent, there's a lot of developmental things that go on, and those months are critical.
You see things
differently. I had no idea.
Yeah, you see things differently.
Absolutely. And so the grace element is important here too. Give yourself grace for those moments where maybe you have had some situations where you're like, oh man, what was I thinking?
Yeah. But looks like we have some additional comments. Maybe we should address them before we move on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Mel, thank you, Mel, for joining us. You've been a regular on these. We appreciate you. Mel works here at Extension as well. Definitely
Hi,
hard.
Mel.
Hey, Mel. definitely harder depending on the number of kids in the house. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Sarah says, listen to understand, not to respond. What is the right question to ask? So, like, how do you ask for feedback from your friends and your family without making them feel awkward?
Ooh, that's a good question. And again, I think that we just can't go to these folks without being in a good place with the relationship first, right?
Yeah.
So, choose your time wisely, I guess, would be my thing. So if you're having a recent fight with somebody, maybe that's not the right time to go ask them for some feedback. Or if you find yourself into some conflict once in a while with somebody. But, it is important to do that. So hopefully, you've developed these great relationships with folks where you can kind of just sit down and just have an honest conversation.
Yeah.
I would maybe start with, for myself and say something like, Brianna, I've been thinking a lot about, my reaction the other day, and I would really love to maybe hear, what did you take away from that?
Absolutely.
And again, notice that it's about me, right? I'm wanting to seek this information, but I'm asking for your opinion, your perspective about something, right?
Right.
And it's important then for when Brianna starts to say, "Well, I think this," and I'm going to myself, that's going to shut that conversation down, right? So you have to look at your body language. You have to, remain in control and be very intentional about that. I think you really need to open these up and close the mouth as much as possible and let other people communicate with you. Again, you don't have to agree with what they're saying, but it is a gift that they're giving to you,
Absolutely.
right? But hopefully you've developed some good relationships with some folks out there. And again, I wouldn't necessarily do this with people that I don't trust so much.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting that we all have to be open and vulnerable to every single person, and we've all been burned before.
We have.
I get that. But it is those people, I go to you a lot. I go to Ray a lot when it's focused on work. If it's focused maybe more on my personal life, I go to my daughter a lot. I go to some of my friends a lot. I've had some friends that I've developed with lifelong friends, that I've known since we were kids, that I still keep in contact with. And every once in a while, I'll give them a call and say, "Hey, I bumped into this. I had this problem, and I wanted to share that with you. And I wanted you to think about, what was my role in that? How could I have handled that maybe a little bit differently?" And so that's another question I kind of like to ask as well.
I think that's a great point, because I want you to think about maybe if especially in a career, and I found myself doing this a lot. If there's somebody that you kind of like or you kind of look up to from afar, again, going back to the sergeant that I had at the police department, shout out to Doc if you're watching, but that was something I don't know that he ever knew, but I was watching the way he handled things. And then when I realized, hey, I like the way he's handling these things, now I'm going to choose to go to him and say, hey, here's my situation. What do you think about this? Or here's a situation I was in last week. How would you have handled it differently?
Right.
And so it does opens up that opportunity. I'll tell you, as I mentioned earlier, when I was asking the how am I doing question with my family and with my friends, it was awkward at first. And they were kind of like, huh? And now it's just a normal thing that they expect. And so I think once you just kind of take the Band-Aid off real quick and then go.
We kind of, Ray's famous saying here is that we kind of, we teach people how to treat us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Based on our past interactions with them.
Absolutely.
So it's great to hear that you're incorporating that into an everyday kind of conversation and that kind of thing. Again, trying to develop that habit of self-awareness. Now, if that stuff is difficult, if you do find it difficult to maybe go to people and maybe ask some of these questions, because it does put you in a pretty vulnerable spot, there are some things, some tools, I think that we can talk about that might be a little bit more just private, that you can work through and maybe come to some realizations for yourself and maybe some deeper self-awareness. So the first one that I really like, it comes from a gentleman named David Novak. You may have heard that name before. David Novak was the former CEO of Yum Brands. So we're talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken and Taco Bell and Pizza Hut. And this is what he calls his Lifeline exercise. And so when you take a look at this, that's on your screen now, what he has done is he's drawn a timeline, essentially, that horizontal line going across this graphic. And what he's done is he's put little points above the line if it's a positive experience in your lifetime, or he puts a line below that horizontal line if it is a kind of a negative experience in your lifetime. And you can tell just how intense those feelings were, those events were for him, based on how far above or how far below he put these points on this horizontal line. Once he's done that, he even made little notes about each one of those events, and these are notes that make sense to him. Maybe they might not make so much sense to us as we kind of look at this, but they certainly made a lot of sense to him. And then what he did is he kind of drew a line connecting all of these things. And so what I find very interesting about this approach is that you start to see maybe some trends. And in terms of maybe how you handle some of the things that are either positive or negative events in your life. What kinds of things did these events, how did your perspective change as a result maybe of some of these different events,
Right.
So when I think about some of the things in my life, that were real positive, I think about the birth of my daughter and how excited and how that really made me grow up very quickly. And I look back at how before she was born and how I behaved versus after she was born, and I grew up a lot in a very, very short period of time. And then I think I look at some other things like the death of my sister when I was versus just started out in college, and what a traumatic event that really kind of had on me. And there was a long period of time there between that and the birth of my daughter. So I could tell, that caused a lot of problems and how I approach people and how I approach particular problems in my life based on some of those events. And so, by taking your time with this and being honest with yourself about these events, again, nobody needs to see this, right? This is just a tool
Right.
for you to think about your life and to think about how your life has been shaped through these positive as well as these negative events, right? So it helps you to kind of understand what your perspective is.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can tell, one of the things I've been doing a lot of studying into is, and I just have an interest in recognizing how some of those situations and all, from childhood on up have really shaped and formed us. And so I think this is a great exercise to just take part in. We've all done it here at MTI. So definitely helps give you a better perspective. All right, Dewey, you got one other one here.
Oh, and then
here it comes.
Yeah, this is a really good one too. So when we start talking about the idea of asking for feedback and that kind of thing, this is kind of where this comes in. And so what you're looking at here is essentially just a matrix, right? And it's going to be based on a couple different variables. Let's start over here to the left. And you see that on the side of this, it kind of says, known to others. Okay, so this is the part of your life that is actually known to other people. You share it with other people witness these kinds of things, but it's known to them. Okay, and then down below, down here, you have the idea of things that are unknown to others. Because let's face it, we sometimes like to keep things to ourselves, right? So these are things that people really don't know about me. Okay, and then if you look over at the top, okay, so up here you have the idea of things that are known to yourself. You know about them, okay, and then you have things that are over here that are more unknown to yourself, because we all have some blind spots, right? So if we start up here in that very left-hand corner, this is the things about you that other people know about you, as well as things that you know about yourself, right? So these are things that are very transparent. These are behaviors that are known. People know you know about them. You're showing your strengths. You're showing sometimes your talents to people here. But this is the area of your life that's really out in the open, right? Everybody knows who you are and you know yourself, okay? Now, if we go across over here, and this is the this green box, and this is the things that are certainly other people recognize about you, but you don't recognize it yourself. It's unknown to yourself. And so when I think about these kinds of things, these are oftentimes misperceptions. These are areas that kind of lack that idea of self-regulation. I need to kind of work on this area a little bit. Other people see these behaviors pretty routinely in me, but I might not necessarily see them myself. And so I need to work on this area. This is an area that I probably need to spend a little bit more time with this practice of self-awareness, okay, to bring those things into my own awareness. Now, if we go down the bottom over here, and I'm going to go to this purple box, and this is the things that are, I certainly know about myself, but I haven't necessarily been open or shared them with anybody else. And so this is the idea of things that are probably unclaimed, underutilized talents. You know, I have some things about myself, but I'm not going to let you in on it. So you don't know about these things, but I do. And so oftentimes these are just kind of undeveloped, you know, kind of talents and things like that. Now, we get this last box, right? This is the things that are unknown to other people. They're also kind of unknown to myself. And if you think about this, this could be a very huge kind of unknown sense of potential for you. So when we look at this, two really big strategies kind of come to mind. And it all is about trying to increase that red box, right? That first quadrant where it's known to ourselves and known to others. We want as much as possible to be kind of out in the open, right? So in order to do that, there are two kind of communication strategies you can use to help you expand that box, okay? So some of these other areas then around it, you can take this box then and kind of expand it into those areas. So the first one is about asking questions, right? So asking other people about myself, you know, things that they know about me, but I'm unaware of them. Okay, and this is where we could have some pretty vulnerable conversations. But by asking that questions, things that used to be in that green box now then kind of come over into that red box, and your red box expands, right? Now, the other thing then is to focus in on that purple box, right? So these are things that are unknown to other people, but I know them about myself. So this would require me then to self-disclose information. It would require me to share that information with other people so that, again, it expands that red box of things that I know about myself and that other people know me, okay? And so by doing that, it really becomes more transparent to everybody, and it helps you to kind of think about how not only how I see myself, but how other people see me as well.
Yeah, it's such a great tool, Dewey. And here's the thing: is step back into the scene here. Almost forgot my mouse. Here's the thing about this is we are really doing a justice, I don't know if that's the right word for it, to our relationship, or honoring, that's a better word, our relationship with other people, to disclose some of those things that they may not know about us, because it is, whatever it is, their perception's shaped already. But if you can give a little bit of context to it, then maybe you're kind of getting closer to aligning that idea of who you are with how they think you are.
Right.
I think we're getting better as a society about doing this. We talk a lot more openly about things. And so I'm grateful. I think that that's certainly a good step forward for a lot of these relationships.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
But I want to ask you all, what are some other ideas, some other strategies maybe you have used? Continue to share those. This box set is so good. Oh, okay. It's taking screenshots. Thanks for this. Oh, you're so welcome, Sarah. I do want to give a shout out to Sedalia Business Women shared our post, our Facebook event. So maybe some of you ladies are on today. Thanks for joining us. But this whole concept really does, it just expands the opportunities for us as leaders, and expands the opportunities for growing and developing and building on all of those relationships.
Yeah.
It starts with self-awareness.
It really does. It starts with self-awareness. Now, a couple other tools that I think are kind of important as you are thinking about this. And again, I want to draw us back to the end of the year and the start of a new a brand new year in 2022, is that, once we kind of have engaged in some of this self-reflection and this idea of self-awareness, I will encourage you to kind of prioritize those things that you might want to work on.
Great point.
Or might want to change. If you try to do way too many things at once, you probably will fail at all of them.
Yeah.
And so when you're thinking about your opportunities for improvement here, I would really encourage people to prioritize maybe one or two things that you really want to maybe make a big leap forward in the coming year. One or two things about yourself that you really want to change. Now, some ways that you might want to prioritize that. You might want to look at things like low-hanging fruit, right? So are there things that you can change about yourself that might be relatively easy, but as you accomplish them, they become more habitual, right? So you're doing more and more of those things. And the other thing about prioritizing them from that perspective of low-hanging fruit is that you can start to build momentum, right? So once you start feeling good about yourself, that you have made some positive change, that you have, kind of moved forward a little bit, it kind of builds momentum and you want to do more and more and more of that, okay? Another way you might want to prioritize things is to take a look at what I call the spread effect. Right. So if I really change myself in one area or one way, what kind of effect might it have in a lot of other areas of my life? So if I really make a change in one area, that it can really spread that effect in other areas of my life. And so that might be another way to do it. But however you want to do it, I just encourage people to maybe choose one or two as opposed to saying, oh my gosh, I have a list of 50 things that I don't like about myself but I want to change, and nothing ever happens. It's kind of like making a New Year's resolution on December 31st when you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to set my alarm an hour earlier and get up and start exercising and go to the gym, right? And then when the New Year's comes and the alarm goes off an hour earlier and you hit that snooze button, I just want you to know that when you do that, you've taught yourself that you can't trust yourself.
That's a great point.
Right. You've just reinforced the idea that, I'm going to sleep in. Right.
Right.
You made a commitment to yourself and you didn't follow through with it. Right. So that's why I encourage people to, go through this process of some type of prioritization. Right. If you're thinking about that. Right. You don't want to do too much at once.
No, not at all. Not at all. So, if you are, for example, as we mentioned, you do the journaling. If that's something that maybe you want to start practicing a little bit more, all right, maybe you set your, put it on your calendar for lunchtime. And that way you're committed to that during that time, or you do it before bed or whatever it may look like for you. But certainly start small. I love that approach, Dewey. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I guess the final thing I'd say is thinking about, once you have a priority or a need that you've identified that you want to change about yourself, what's your vision for that? What does a changed Dewey look like? Or what does a changed Brianna look like?
Sure.
What is that vision for yourself? And this probably requires us to maybe identify some goals. It probably requires us to identify some more specific action steps so that, when I encounter a situation in 2022 that I'm really working on, that maybe I recognize it, I stop, and it requires me to think a little bit more about it, be more intentional about how I might move forward with that. Right?
Absolutely. I do. I love the idea of what can maybe have the biggest impact. And I'll just share, one of the ones for me was that I mentioned earlier, always kind of struggling with emotional expression a little bit. And one of the things I was really inclined to do is I used to, if I was in a bad mood, my day was thunderstorms roaring, I'd come in and I'd just shut the door and completely cut myself off from people. I think you all even witnessed that.
We have. And I will say, you have not done that.
No.
Now, I know that you haven't done it because before we moved into our current offices, you didn't really have a door.
I
You're
didn't
in a
have a door,
cubicle.
no. I shut my curtain.
But now, slamming a curtain, that made a lot of noise.
That's right.
But, since we moved in to these new offices where you do have a door, I have not seen that from you.
Yeah.
This whole entire 2021.
Yeah.
I have not seen that. So you can tell that, you are taking this seriously. You are making very intentional choices about how you're handling those emotions. Do you feel that you've been growing as a result of it?
Absolutely. And I've seen where that ripple effect not only happens in our workplace, but I've taken that home with me too in areas. And I feel like I've reined in some of those emotions a little bit more. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it's like a practice every day, right? I've been on this mission for a while now. And my whole thing, though, is thinking about the impact that it's had. I think about our relationships here on our team, and they've grown substantially over the last year and a half, deepening. And I think that that's great. And that's what I want.
Yeah.
So I'm like, whoa, well, let's keep doing it then.
Yeah. So you're starting to see the impact that that self-awareness and that decision to change.
Absolutely.
That self-awareness and the decision to make a different choice.
Yeah.
Is having on your relationships. I think that's great.
I know. Yeah.
How about a high five?
All right, high five. High five. Yeah. So whatever it is for you, be gracious in your approach to yourself, but take time. Take time to really invest in this. And this is the biggest element. I'll tell you, as a certified emotional intelligence coach, they taught us in that this particular area, the self-awareness area, is if you're going to start somewhere, this is
the place to start.
It is. It absolutely is. This will have the greatest impact on your professional growth and your personal growth. So start here. With it, I want to start just prepping our people out here. We're going to be wrapping up soon. So if you have questions or comments, go ahead and send those in to us. You can do it either through the comment section here on Facebook Live, or using the QR code there on your screen if you prefer to stay anonymous. But as we think about this, Dewey, the last Facebook Live event of 2021, I'm so glad I got to do it with you. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you for letting me come and play in your studio.
Oh, this has been so much fun. And we will be continuing these into 2022. Some other really cool opportunities. And we've seen a lot of interest in this, but we're actually doing some other free sessions, and these will be in Zoom, and they're only 20 minutes. Though you can find all those topics on our website, mti.missouri.edu. Oh my goodness, we're gonna do the podcast still.
Podcast is really successful, and a lot of people continue to download those. So I really encourage you to download it yourself wherever you get your podcast at. It's called The Weekly Workplace.
Check out The Weekly Workplace.
Yep, a lot of fun, a lot of insight, and it's a lot of fun just to sit back and just have a conversation with my staff. That's the part that I enjoy the most, probably.
It really is. It really is, and we do that. We talked about that, at our last recording.
And it's another tool of self-awareness. I learned so much from you all just in those conversations. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been great. So we'll be doing that. We'll also be starting a new thing. We're going to call them the 60-second spark. And so these will happen every week. We'll send emails out to those who are interested and sign up for our newsletter, which you can see in the description of this Facebook Live. And it's just going to be 1 minute of encouragement, of motivation to kind of get your week going. And so I'm excited about that too. And then, of course, we have a brand new hybrid. We're doing a hybrid approach to both of our open enrollments next year. But you want to talk a little bit about the next steps?
Well, yeah. So many people are familiar with our supervisory certificate series. It's been around for a while, and it keeps evolving, and it just gets better and better and better. And I can't tell you, we ought to look this up and come up with a number, but we have trained thousands of people with that supervisory certificate series. But one thing that people keep asking about is, what's next beyond that? What's my next step in my management, my leadership, my career journey? And so we are going to create a new series about that. What is that next step? So it's beyond just the idea of supervision, and it's getting into maybe some more leadership types of concepts and topics. And so we're really excited about starting that as well.
Yeah, a lot of emotional intelligence is going to be in that one. Ray and I will be teaching. Again, we're both certified EQ coaches, and that is, again, everything we're talking about today. Self-awareness is a big part of that in emotional intelligence. So, lots of great things. And I will say, as we mentioned, the hybrid approach, what we mean by hybrid, in both of those cases, our Soup series and the Next Steps program, you can choose whether you want to take it online or you want to come hang out with me in person. I'll be doing the one in February. And so we got about half and half right now in our class that's signed up. So you can find all that information, mti.missouri.edu. So lots of great things. I'm not seeing any questions come in. Let me check one more place here. Forgive me for a second. Dewey, tell me. Holiday plans?
Holiday plans. Still trying to make them, actually.
Are you?
We've got so many people and friends I want to see and family I want to see. And we seem to be scattered all over the wind. So we're trying to figure out ways we can go around and see all of them. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. But what about you?
This is the first year ever that we are staying home. Everyone
Santa
is coming
will be
to
able
us.
to find you then,
I know,
right? Yeah,
I know.
Santa will find you then.
I know,
no doubt about it.
The perk of having a 1-year-old. Everyone wants to come to him. So
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I can't believe it. Happy holidays. Happy holidays to everyone out there.
Happy holidays to you all too. I hope that your 2021, that you're able to favorably look at that, look back at that, examine that, and then to think about what's new for you in 2022. Did you catch that? What's new for you in 2022? So that's our challenge to you for the rest of this year. So happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. See you next year.
See you next year.